Okay, hello everybody. My name's Simon Buckingham-Shum. I'm the director of the Connected Intelligence Center, and with me today I've got my postdoctoral research fellow Lisa Angelique Lim as well, and we have Solly here from Learning Design and possibly others joining, but we'll record the whole thing so you won't have missed anything if you're watching this afterwards. We're going to talk today about one of the data analytics and even AI-powered tools that we are developing at the Connected Intelligence Center called AcaWriter. We have been using this at UTS since about 2017, possibly the pilot started even earlier than that. And we're going to introduce you to what it does, ways of using it that at UTS, and given the times that we're in, we're going to talk a little bit about ChatGPT as well, because it is right here in the AI and writing space, and we're going to talk a little bit about how this AcaWriter tool relates to ChatGPT as well towards the end. So just to keep things up to date. So here's the agenda just for the next hour briefing. By the time we get done, we're going to talk about the challenges of academic writing. We're not here to teach spelling and grammar, but there are well-known tools already for dealing with spelling and grammar. We're going to dealing specifically with the features of academic writing that make it distinctive and interesting and hard to learn in some cases. We're going to look at three contexts of the use of AcaWriter here at UTS: law, which is the writing of a law essay and a business report; HDR, research abstracts and summaries. A very particular kind of writing is a research abstract for our master's and PhD students. And we're going to talk about critical reflection, writing first-person reflective pieces, and what it means to do that well and how to get feedback on that as well. And then we're going to, as I say, drop in a little bit at the end about generative AI, all the excitement and hype and hopes and fears around tools like ChatGPT, and there are in fact a whole realm of new AI writing aids coming out now. And then we'll close with a bit of discussion. And we want to emphasize that, of course, we're just giving you a sort of lightning tour here. This is the conversation starter that we hope you will follow up with us on to discuss in more detail how this might work out in your context. Okay, so first thing is to say that AcaWriter is now a UTS-wide tool, which is available to all students. We'll give you these slides afterward. You can follow these links, but it was announced to the students in their newsletter back in May 3 years ago, to say, hey, you can get instant feedback on your academic writing now. This is not something that many universities can offer other than Grammarly or other mainstream products, but this is a tool that's going to focus on academic writing. So this is something of a world first for UTS. And it's now quite well embedded in the practices of a number of academics, and it's been used by, I think, pretty much every faculty. And just for those interested, this is the Academic Writing Analytics Project here at the Connected Intelligence Center. Is a long-standing R&D project, working and researching how we develop these tools, how we work closely with academics to co-design them, and how we research the impact that these tools have on the teacher and the student experience. So plenty of papers to go read there when if you want to dig deeper into that. And you can see that many of the authors here, for those of you here at UTS, we've got authors who are not only researchers here at KIC, but also academics in our business school, our graduate school of health, our law faculty, and so forth. Okay, well, in case you weren't up to speed, many students find writing hard. We expect students to arrive at university knowing how to write coherently and fluently, and sadly, that's not necessarily the case. And it turns out that many academics spend an inordinate amount of time, perhaps they might feel, just trying to teach students how to write well. Not teaching them, social work, physics, or IT, but just complaining about the quality of writing they're getting to. And part of the goal here is to see whether automated feedback can fill part of the gap there, because there's only so much time that your average academic's got to give feedback to students. AcaWriter is aiming to help in a very specific way, okay? Precise, timely feedback is really important for any kind of learning, and that's no difference here when it comes to writing. And we're going to be unpacking what we mean by academic writing, but academic writing is often making your thinking visible. You can't just assert things out of the blue. You have to build up to them. You have to make an argued, reasoned case. Okay, you have to make your thinking visible so that your reader, or perhaps for a research student, your reviewer, can see how you are getting to your claims and your conclusions. It's obviously humanly impossible to provide all students with 24/7 instant feedback on draft after draft after draft. So this is a niche opportunity for automation without wanting to do our humans out of a job. We're not talking about automated grading here. That's still a very complex, nuanced judgment that we need academically trained people to make. Okay, so no grading, but feedback on what we're calling rhetorical moves, and we're going to explain what we mean by those rhetorical moves. And we have basically two kinds of writing genre that we support. One we call analytical writing. It's written in the third person, and it's the essay, the research paper, the literature review. You're demonstrating your mastery of ideas, the literature, you are making arguments, you're trying to persuade the reader of something. And it's written in an objective, analytical, rational kind of way. And then we have the reflective writing genre, the learning journal, the reflective essay, the project review. Now I'm writing in the first person, and as we will see, I'm doing all sorts of things that we don't normally do in analytical writing. And often students and academics and tutors don't have good language for talking about what we mean by good reflective writing. Okay, so let's think about analytical writing. Okay, academically, it's been defined by Swales as a discoursal or rhetorical unit that performs a coherent communicative function. Okay, that's academic speak for these kinds of things, right? And these will all look very familiar to anyone who is working in academia. These are the kinds of constructions that we often use, okay? And the people like Swales who've analyzed this have analyzed the function that these kinds of sentences perform. And it turns out that there is a small and fairly stable set of functions that appear over and over again in academic writing. And if students can understand these functions, then that's a real, they've got a real language for understanding what we mean by good writing. And the rhetorical moves are like shorthand terms that we've invented to capture the functions that these kinds of sentences are playing, okay? So expressing surprise about something, these results are unexpected considering da-da-da-da-da. Okay, or contrast. We're very interested in disagreements and debates in academia, right? This approach fails to address the issue of dum-de-dum-de-dum, all right? And you have to learn how to use language to make these moves. You can't just say, Bloggs is an idiot, Green knocked him out of the park in 2025, or, right? You have to make these moves using the appropriate linguistic constructions. That's what we need the students to learn. Okay, let me just pause there. Any questions so far? This is the meat of what AcaWriter is going to focus on in analytical writing. We'll get to reflective writing in just a moment. Are we all good?
I've got a question. Do we know if this set of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 is complete?
It's a pretty stable set, yes.
Okay.
It would be odd not to find these in pretty much any field, but there are definitely disciplinary differences. And the way that you make these moves varies quite radically. Sometimes, depending on, arts and humanities are going to be generally much more verbose and use different kinds of constructions than you might find in physics or IT.
Okay,
But
cool.
in the academic literature, where we're dealing with ideas, evidence, and trends, these things are just the bread and butter of academic writing. Yeah, so they're fairly stable.
Okay, cool. Thanks. No one's suddenly going to discover one or invent one.
No, you'll see a slight variation on one in a bit, where we talk about this. There are some specifics. When we come to, say, writing an abstract, it does some very, very particular things, which we'll talk about.
Cool.
Okay, so that's one of the reasons that we're focusing on this as a university-wide tool with some tuning for different contexts, because students have to learn how to do this. And even if they don't want to become academics, right, they need to learn how to make these moves in their assignments. But if you're going to move into the world of business, and as we'll see later from the examples from the business school, doing a business analysis case, pitching for money, you have to describe the current state of the art. You have to make an argument that there's a problem or a weakness or an opportunity of some sort. You have to make persuasive cases and so forth. Okay, so what does this look like in action? Let's jump to the law faculty. And here we've got a screenshot from the AcaWriter system where the student has pasted in some text and AcaWriter is analyzing the text, and we can see 3 tabs here, okay? And the first tab, AcaWriter is highlighting sentences and putting a little letter lozenge at the beginning of the sentence to show what kind of sentence it recognizes. So unlike spelling and grammar checking, it's highlighting the sentences that it recognizes as good, as opposed to underlining sentences with what it thinks is a problem. Okay. So you can see that this sentence here is, with the increasing popularity of dum-de-dum-de-dum-de-dum-de-dum, there's a tendency to assume that something else. Okay. And it's gone, looks like a trend or a tendency of some sort. Okay. It's talking about increasing popularity of something out there in the real world, handheld devices, and it's talking about a tendency to assume. But this could have been talking about a trend in the literature, or it could have been talking about increasing concern about climate change, or anything, right? Or it could be talking about a trend in the data later on in the results section. Okay. The 2012 review does not address, okay, so AcaWriter goes, something does not address. That sounds like a weakness or a problem of some sort, and it calls it a contrasting idea or a tension or an insight. This omission questions the role of. It's also classified that as a C. This essay will discuss. That is one of those S sort of summary signposting sentences telling the reader what's to come. And you often do that in writing. Whether you tell the reader what's to come or what you've just told them to close a section, or what you're about to do in the next section, and so forth. Okay, and then on the second tab, the feedback tab, this is where you get written feedback of the sort that your academic might write if they had time to write detailed feedback to you and every other student about these different aspects of your writing. Okay, it looks like you're missing a background move, which does the following thing. Try using linguistic cues like, the past decade has seen, recent studies indicate, etc. Okay, or it didn't see any E's, no E's, emphasis to highlight key ideas. If there's a key idea you'd like to emphasize, try including linguistic cues like it's important to note that, or okay? And here's the third tab. This is a tab which is straightforward for the academic to modify and tune to the context of the assignment, right? So the law students have been asked to do an essay on a particular thing. And here the academic has provided some example sentences that illustrate how the aspects of the assessment rubric are addressed by that writing, and it maps it to the AcaWriter move. Okay, so we're making very clear to the student that AcaWriter is relevant given the assessment rubric. And here are some examples of how to make moves like that in the context of law, right? This article will trace the obligations found in the contract, right? They're all law examples. They're not social work examples or architecture examples. Okay, all right. One thing that we do a lot of as part of our applied research and our interest in learning design and how good learning design makes use of AcaWriter is we've got an activity here, a student activity. I won't go into the details, but you can see that they do a number of activities and then they do something with AcaWriter. Then they have a conversation with a peer about the feedback, and then they do some more work with AcaWriter. And then they did a survey, and then there was a guide for how they can use AcaWriter in the future. All right. So you'll see a couple of these learning design patterns, or they're almost like, you know, lesson plans essentially, right? Which you can take and adapt. Okay, and that's exactly what the business school did. They were excited by what they saw in the law faculty, and they said, we want to do that, but you know, we're teaching business students. They're doing organization strategy analysis. And so here's the third tab where they're giving examples relevant to this assignment, which is all about, you know, the strategy that organizations are using for their marketing or whatever. So, you know, there's an example here about Nike, and this is an example of a summary sentence. This report defines performance for Nike as a whole from blah, 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 right? And these are the rubric criteria very clearly set out and explaining that they should be looking for these kinds of feedback cues in order to assess whether they're meeting the criteria in the writing rubric. Okay. And there's the whole tab 3, in fact, showing examples that talk about corporate strategy. Okay, now, another thing we're very interested in as part of our applied research is, well, are the students really engaging well with the feedback? And it became clear that in one subject, this wasn't happening very well. This is, in fact, this is the example from the business school. So what we did was we said to the students, print out the PDF report. Okay, so print the PDF, get your own pens out, and you highlight sentences that you think perhaps AcaWriter missed, or add comments about whether you agree or disagree with AcaWriter. So this was a scaffolded activity to promote deeper engagement with the feedback. And they had to provide this with their assignment. Okay, so this is an example where the academic is very engaged with trying to improve the students' written communication skills and is literally changing an aspect of their assignment in order to include a few points to evidence critical engagement with AcaWriter. They don't have to agree with everything, but we want to see critical engagement. And later on, we'll show you a Canvas module that Lisa in the team has developed to scaffold this activity. So you can drop that module into your course if you want to scaffold this reflective engagement activity. All right. Okay, moving swiftly on to the second example of analytical writing, and this is HDR research writing. That was the context we worked in, but as you'll see, this kind of writing is also relevant for other students doing project reports or executive summaries, because the essence of writing a good abstract is to, you know, encapsulate for the reader the key messages as to why they might want to read on for the whole paper. Okay, and we have built on work also by that guy Swales that I mentioned earlier, who has developed a model used very widely in training PhD students called CARS, Creator Research Space. And you can see 1, 2, and 3 moves here, which have then been broken down. But basically, what you do in an archetypal research summary is establish that a topic is important, okay? establish that there's some kind of problem, right? There's a gap in our knowledge. There's a big debate going on about something. And then you step into the niche, you step into that gap, and you explain to the reader, well, I've got something to contribute here. Okay, those are the archetypal moves. And so we built on this CARS model. And if you Google CARS, you will see lots of people using this all over the world and lots of diagrams that illustrate CARS. Okay, and then we built it into AcaWriter. And this was Sophie Abel's PhD, which you can read in detail if you want. And you can see that it's now highlighting using a slightly different color scheme here. Here's an abstract. It's now widely accepted that timely, actionable feedback is essential for effective learning. Okay, there's a nice background context move. We are asserting that this is important. Actionable feedback is important. Okay, there is no sentence, there's no green sentence at the top about the purpose of the paper. There's a comment about what data science is doing. But then we get to this blue sentence, which is that something is a critical challenge. And we've got evidence showing dum-de-dum-de-dum, some things are not necessarily effective. Okay, so AcaWriter picks up on these phrases and goes, sounds like a problem, sounds like a gap in the literature. And then we have a classic, we present a study that does the following, which is a statement about the findings or the contribution of the paper. And in fact, if you click on show me the details, it will expand these highlighted things and show you these sub-sentence types. These are the ones that I showed you earlier, but it explains in more detail, well, why was that classified as a results findings move? Why was that classified as a research problem move? Okay. Here's another of those learning design patterns where we designed a workshop for students. First of all, face-to-face, then we moved it online. And you can see we've got some broad phases of activity: do, analyze, reflect, change, and reflect again. So that's the high-level learning design pattern. And then here are the actual activities we've got the students to do. And then they start using AcaWriter here. And I won't go into the details here, but again, you can take a look at this and decide to adopt or adapt this to your own student context. Okay, so all of these patterns are available on the website for you to consider. We have another Canvas module. I already mentioned the one for scaffolding deeper engagement. This one was developed by Sophie Abel, a doctoral student, as a Canvas module, which can be dropped straight into your course. And it takes about an hour to do, and it introduces all the students to the different rhetorical moves in writing an abstract. There's some nice interactive exercises that they do to drag and drop, different kinds of questions onto different kinds of moves. There's a sample abstract here, and they have to drag and drop the blobs onto the right colored square to show that they understand what function these different sentences are playing in the abstract, and so forth. So a really nice, engaging module, which introduces all these moves, and then the student is all set to use AcaWriter. Okay, I'll just pause there again before we go to reflective writing. Did that spark any thoughts or questions? Otherwise, just drop them in the chat as we go, and we'll pick them up en route. Okay, all right. So now we go to reflective writing, completely different. And sometimes students haven't done this before, depending on where their schooling was, depending on their discipline. Okay, so we work closely with academic learning and literacy academics in the Institute for Multimedia and Learning. This is how we started out early on, working with one of them, Rosalie Goldsmith, who's worked with us. And this is what she gave us. She said, this is the kind of thing I give to faculty academics to help them think about designing good reflective writing activities and how to give feedback to students. And you can see here, this is just really helpful, expressions of experimentation and ability. So we might expect students to try using some of these constructions. Expressions showing shifts in perception. That's always very exciting to hear when students began to say, I realized, or, I became aware, this is a real shift in the way they're seeing the world. Talking about the past, talking about the future and how you're changing, being surprised. And we're talking about often experiential learning. They've been on a work placement, and they've just come back from teaching a class of students for the first time, or being in an engineering firm for 6 weeks, or just reflecting on how a team project went, and they're being asked to critically reflect on how their teamwork could have been better, for example. Okay, so often experiential, and often talking about when things went wrong as well. And we're trying to emphasize to the students that, contrary to analytical writing, where generally you basically show how smart you are, right? In reflective writing, we're actually asking you to be a little bit vulnerable and talk about when things didn't go right. But that's okay. Don't worry about that. This shows that you're learning. Okay, so what we did was we worked with our academics who specialize in coaching reflective writing with our academics, and we looked at all the literature on reflective writing and what makes good reflective writing. And we boiled it down into a simple visual scheme that AcaWriter uses several icons, which you can see here, the square, the circle, and the triangle, and using typography as well to annotate the student's writing to show these kinds of attributes, okay? We really are interested in self-critique. It's okay to talk about feelings. You will certainly be talking about your beliefs and your learning and your knowledge and your understanding. But that's not the only thing we want you to talk about. Otherwise, that would just be analytical writing, okay? And then these icons. So we'll see what this looks like. So when we were developing this, we would get a tutor to annotate a piece of writing. And then we would run it through AcaWriter and see whether AcaWriter would spot similar sentences. And we were able to show that it was doing quite a good job. It wasn't perfect by any means. And as I'll emphasize later on, the AcaWriter is not perfect. It's giving formative feedback, but we really do want the students to push back and think critically for themselves as well, if they don't agree with the feedback. And you saw that when we gave them that PDF annotation task. They weren't just asked to agree with AcaWriter, they could disagree if they wanted. So this is what it looks like when you actually paste your text in and ask for feedback. Okay, there's the key at the top, just to remind you what these mean. And you can see we've got green triangles appearing where it seems that they're talking about how they're changing and what they might do better next time. We've got pink circles here for something that was challenging or surprising in some way. We've got underlined text here where they're talking about their understanding, and so forth. Okay. When we ask the students what they think about this is all part of how we do our research. These are the kinds of things that they say, and you can read in detail about how we conduct that research in the papers if you're curious. We did a lot of work with Cherie Lucas in the School of Pharmacy, who has been teaching her master's students how to reflect critically as pharmacists in the making. Okay. Now, this is the Canvas module I mentioned that now scaffolds online that activity where originally we got them to print out and scribble on their PDFs. And Lisa developed this. And first of all, they see an explanation of how AcaWriter's feedback maps to the assessment rubric that they have been given for their assignment. And then we asked them, well, what does your AcaWriter feedback tell you? And they record some notes here. Now look at the feedback tab, spend some time thinking and editing your draft, get more feedback. What do you notice? Have things changed? And some more questions to reflect on, and then upload the PDF here. So if an academic wants to use this as a scaffolding activity, then there's just a Canvas module they can drop in there. And we'll help customize that for you to your assignment. So just to summarize then, we've got analytic and we've got reflective writing, two very different ways of writing. As an academic, you can provide contextual examples to help your students understand what this looks like for your kind of writing in your assignment. And there are ways of customizing the tabs. Tab 3 is where you provide the customized examples for your assignment. Tab 2 is where you could have the option of changing the feedback messages if you really weren't very happy with the way that those messages were being expressed. Most academics are, but we do have the ability to change those if you wanted to. Tab 1 is the deepest kind of change. We don't do that very often because it's quite labor intensive, but if AcaWriter was making a lot of errors of a certain sort because of the kind of writing that you were dealing with, then we might be able to change its behavior. Okay, so that's like a deeper change. Okay. But this one is an easy one to do, and it's a very helpful one for the students to see examples in the context of your assessment rubric and examples. There are lots of educator resources available to you on the main website. Resources for educators, case studies, examples of those learning design patterns that I've shown you. And videos that some academics have created as well to hopefully inspire you, because one thing that students sometimes scratch their heads around is, why is this really relevant to my degree? So here we have, in this case, this is Nicole Sutton in our accounting faculty, explaining to accountants that contrary to what they may believe, actually they're going to spend an awful lot of time writing reports. They're not just going to have their heads buried in spreadsheets. Really clear communication is important. They do need to care about the quality of their analytical writing. Okay. And just as a broader context, AcaWriter is just one of the automated feedback tools that we have developed here in the Connected Intelligence Center. And there's a whole set of LX Lab sessions that you can replay on that link, which allow you to look at how these different feedback tools can fit in to the different kinds of questions you might have. So, for example, this is the site. How can you enrich your whole feedback ecosystem with automated feedback? How do you build student belonging with automated feedback? How do you try and address variable student pace of learning using automated feedback? And how can you help diagnose your students' needs with automated feedback? So just wanted to flag that for you if this is something that you're getting interested in, but just to emphasize that we're absolutely here to have conversations with you afterwards if you want to follow up to understand more about how this could fit into your context. And I see that we've got people here, not just from the faculties, but also from other units that help support students with their writing in helps. Okay, right, I'll just pause there before we jump into generative AI, because that's an important new development that I just wanted to say a few words about. So any thoughts or questions? That's the end of the lightning tour of AcaWriter. Okay. All right. In that case, we'll just push on, and then we'll leave a little bit of time for any further closing reflections. So generative AI is making all the headlines at the moment. ChatGPT is the one that seized all the headlines, but there are others now from other companies. And we have really crossed an interesting line now. And of course, there's a lot of worry about students who might use this for cheating and just simply outsource their writing to the AI. But there are many more interesting ways that this could be used for writing. And not only myself, but colleagues in IML and the LX Lab are providing lots of good resources for you to learn more about this. But given that we've been talking about rhetorical moves, I thought I'd check in with ChatGPT whether it knew about Swale's work. And absolutely, yes, it does. Here's a very nice little introductory paragraph about Swales and his book and so forth. So I then asked ChatGPT whether it could analyze my writing to identify rhetorical moves. I was wondering whether it had just done AcaWriter out of a job. Yes, I can analyze your writing. Okay, so I pasted in some text from a talk I gave, and I asked it to identify the moves in this. And here's the feedback that it came back with. Okay, so it gives a little summary of the text. And then it says, based on the work by Swales, I can see that you're establishing the research territory, you're establishing the niche, you're occupying that niche, and you're raising a problem. Pretty good, right? This is straight out of ChatGPT, and that was version 3.5. Version 4 is out now. I haven't tried it yet. So you can even just have a little chat with it, and it will pick up on some of these things. Of course, it doesn't directly annotate your text. It's giving it in a chat metaphor, so it's just a conversation. But that's quite interesting. We haven't done exhaustive testing on this. It doesn't always get it right. But it, again, as an aid to critical reflection, this is something to help the students, for sure. Students may well, of course, want to try drafting in ChatGPT. So I set it the challenging task of a research abstract that is summarizing the discovery of extraterrestrial life. And lo and behold, it comes up with an abstract, as you would expect. And it's written in not bad academic English, right? This isn't a blog post or a tweet. It's a research abstract. The AI has written something. We better let the AI comment on it. So here we are pasting that into AcaWriter, and AcaWriter is going over ChatGPT's abstract and highlighting the moves that it can recognize. And you can see we've got the detailed view here. So it's flagged it E and C. Okay, remember E is emphasis of a significant or important idea. C is contrasting ideas of some sort. And the sentence, this communication raises profound questions about the future of our planet and the importance of protecting it. Okay, so you can see lots of good emphasis words in there. Profound questions and the importance of, right? But it's raising questions, right? So AcaWriter is spotting that something is raising questions, which is why it's flagging it as a contrast move. And it's colored it blue because we have a rule that says, if you've got one from that category and one from this category, blue is even more important, so that we're going to go blue. But when you click on the detailed view, you get to see that actually there was an orange there as well. Okay, and then we have an S sentence as well, a summary signaling sentence about what the paper's going to do. Okay, all right, so interesting. Now what we've got essentially is, oh, and here's the feedback as well to ChatGPT, if we wanted to give ChatGPT on what it has and hasn't done. Okay. So we're now in a situation where we've got AI able to assist with the writing and drafting. AI is able to assist with giving feedback, and we've got AcaWriter as well. So we may be looking at a situation of AcaWriter and ChatGPT being used together. The challenge for us as a university is to help students use this in what we're calling an effective ethical way. And the DVC for education worked with myself and others to produce a short piece which says we're interested in promoting effective engagement with generative AI using, for example, asking these kinds of questions, but also ethical engagement. We're certainly worried about cheating, so we're interested in academic integrity, but we're also interested in promoting critical reflection on where is all this stuff coming from, right? I mean, there's lots of debate right now about how ChatGPT obtained all of these texts and whose intellectual property it was being harvested, and so forth. Asking whether students can, in fact, reflect critically on what ChatGPT says. So trying to promote that critical engagement of the sort that I showed you with that PDF annotation task, and then the Canvas module to promote deeper critical engagement with the feedback. And asking our academics to query themselves as to whether they are actually incentivizing critical engagement, or are they actually writing assignments that can be solved by the AI. Okay, so that blog post is there for you to read in more detail. So this is the situation now. Here we have a student working with AcaWriter to get feedback. Okay, but now we have, and the question is, what do they do with that feedback? Do they adopt the feedback? Do they revise their texts? And some of our researchers looked at how they revised their texts in order to improve the final submission. And they are, having to think by writing still. But now suddenly we've got this AI writer as well. So the student may engage with ChatGPT, for example, in order to produce a text that then, and so we're very interested in, are they able to reject or adopt or adapt the feedback from ChatGPT or the text that ChatGPT is generating? Do they use that or not? Are they still learning to think by writing? That is an open question at the moment. We don't know whether ChatGPT may, in fact, undermine vital learning that students need to do. Right? That's an open question at the moment. But having developed a draft text, now we can take it to AcaWriter, and AcaWriter can give feedback on that text. So this is the new, more interesting situation that we're in now with the emergence of generative AI. And there's lots of open questions about what impact this is going to have on students' thinking ability and their ability to produce quality writing. And whether we should be assessing, for example, students without any AI support, or whether we are, in fact, designing for a future where this will just be part of the environment, just like spelling and grammar checking. And as long as the student can defend the piece of work that they've produced and understand it, then we shouldn't be worrying that they make use of these tools, because they can, in fact, produce a higher quality piece of writing than they can on their own. We have students with accessibility challenges. We have students, many students, of course, with English as a second language, and they are going to be able to produce texts faster and possibly of a higher quality than they can on their own. And so that is the assessment question for us as a university, and which every other university is wrestling with at the moment. So, interesting times. Okay. That's really the end of the briefing, but we've got a bit of time for any reflections from yourselves, questions. If you want, I can also jump into AcaWriter and show you the site live, but you can also do that in your own time and then come back to us with questions. So any thoughts from anybody?
I might do what you suggest and chuck some things in there. I think I've got an assignment from my master's somewhere that I could chuck in and test it out. So yeah, I'm excited to try it and have a go.
Great. I mean, yes, you could paste the whole master's thesis in.
Just a paragraph here and there, just to
I was going to say, yes, you'll also get some quicker feedback if you do smaller chunks. Yes. And for those of you who are teaching students or have samples of writing from courses, first of all, you don't need to be worried that this is going out to some cloud storage somewhere outside of the university. We're not sending texts outside of the UTS, approved environment. But if you have some samples of strong writing and weaker writing, it'll be interesting to paste those in and see what AcaWriter makes, because if AcaWriter cannot differentiate between those and give different feedback, then that would suggest that may not, we've got a mismatch of some sort. And it will be interesting for us to try and figure out what that mismatch is. whether it's something we could fix quickly or whether it's something that would really require a mini project to try and deal with, and we may or may not have capacity for that. So first thing is, if you know what good writing looks like, well, let's see if AcaWriter agrees with you, because if it doesn't, you're not going to be very happy with the feedback AcaWriter is giving. On the other hand, if AcaWriter is giving feedback that you are happy with, then that's a good start. We still give lots of warning to the students that it's not perfect. Writing is a complicated thing, and we very much want them to be thinking critically about this. And AcaWriter is essentially teaching them about these rhetorical moves. It has no clue whether you're talking nonsense or not, right? So you could write beautifully crafted nonsense about why ham sandwiches are better than cheese sandwiches at lunchtime, completely irrelevant to your assignment. But if you used all the right academic moves, AcaWriter would be happy with you, right? So that's why it's not assessment, it's not grading, it's about teaching students what we mean by good analytical or reflective writing. Okay, any other thoughts at the moment? Otherwise, I can give you 10 minutes back of your calendar.
Thank you.
All right. Okay. Thanks very much. Have a play. We'll send you these slides. It's AcaWriter.uts, so nice and easy to remember. And you can just log in using your UTS credentials. Okay. All right. Thanks very much, everybody. I will stop recording now, and this replay will go up for you to look at later on.